Chapter 1291. Two Rituals. Above the gray fog in the ancient palace, Klein's figure appeared. At that moment, on the high-backed chair belonging to the fool sat a person shrouded in grayish-white fog. As Klein returned to Sapphira Castle, this person instantly disintegrated, turning into transparent and distorted worms of spirit that flew to Klein and entered his body.
Thankfully, the restrictions placed by 002 only involved no leaking of secrets or returning. I didn't have my connection with the worms of spirit that were guarding Sapphira Castle severed. Otherwise, they would have already lost control and become monsters.
Klein sighed inwardly as he sat at the seat belonging to the fool, and picked up the fool card he had previously sacrificed to himself. As the card of blasphemy had already been activated, there was no need for him to seek out any additional incantations. All he needed to do was inject spirituality into it to see the corresponding changes. The fool card quickly transformed into a miniature illusory book. With Klein's guidance, it kept flipping back until it reached the last 2 pages. Sequence 1. Attendant of Mysteries. This is an angel who serves the profound mysteries. He has gained initial control of the corresponding domain's authorities. He can summon spirit-body threads of objects that originally existed. He can combine many physical objects or abstract concepts together. The potion formula is as follows. Main ingredients: 1 attendant of mysteries beyond her characteristic. Supplementary ingredients: 9 spirit world specialties. Advancement ritual: build a town consisting only of marionettes and design a trajectory of fate for every marionette. By letting them interact with each other, they would act as a sufficiently real-life painting and create a corresponding area in the spirit world. The larger the town, the more the marionettes involved, the more detailed the daily lives are, and the more realistic in extensiveness the different fates are, the better the ritual's effects would be. Sequence 0. The Fool. This is a true deity. In a sense, he is an embodiment of the corresponding authorities. He is adept at using all kinds of methods to fool all things, showcasing all kinds of fascinating miracles. The potion formula is as follows. Main ingredients: the uniqueness of the fool. 2 attendant of mysteries beyond her characteristics, apart from one's characteristic. Supplementary ingredients: control at least a quarter of the fog of history. Advancement ritual: fool time, history, or fate once. As he read, Klein slowly frowned and silently muttered to himself.
Compared to the advancement ritual of Attendant of Mysteries, the Fool's ritual is just too abstract. What does it mean to fool time, history, or fate? How does one decide if it's successful? Controlling at least a quarter of the fog of history is relatively simple for me. On the one hand, I know a lot of ancient secrets and have lit up many historical fragments. On the other hand, I can directly influence the fog of history through Sapphira Castle. I'll put the Fool's matter aside for now. Currently, my focus is on Attendant of Mysteries. You have to walk one step at a time before running is possible. Of course, some lucky ones can fly directly. It's very easy to find the 9 specialties in the spirit world. Be it to get Miss Messenger to help, or to seek the 7 Lights' advice, this isn't a problem. The advancement ritual is very close to the environment around Zaratul and the Antigonus family's ancestor. Furthermore, it matches what the 7 Lights said about having a close connection with the spirit world. I can determine it to be true for now.
With this in mind, Klein took off the topaz pendant, wrapped around his left wrist, and used divination to confirm the authenticity of the Attendant of Mysteries potion formula. It wasn't that he didn't believe in Emperor Roselle, but his fellow countrymen had likely been influenced by Mr. Dorr before he created the cards of blasphemy. He had gone to the moon and suffered the corruption and contamination of the mother goddess of depravity, thus resulting in distorted memories. It was precisely because of this that it was highly possible that Roselle had buried some traps in the key areas of the cards of blasphemy in his final days. In this aspect, Klein had always been cautious and careful.
Speaking of the primordial moon's true form, the most powerful great old one, the mother goddess of depravity, could it be that the emperor had unknowingly been tainted based on her title? On the moon, perhaps there are many younger brothers and sisters that Bernadette has never met before. Of course, it's unlikely that there are gender differences. The marionettes needed for the Attendant of Mysteries ritual can be obtained from the forsaken land of the gods. the copious number of monsters there, is a good thing. Furthermore, I've accumulated quite a few of them previously.
As Klein's thoughts wandered, he turned his head to look at the other side of the ancient palace and made the grayish-white fog beside the junk pile dissipate. As the fog receded, rows of brownish-yellow seats appeared, each of which sat a figure. Those figures were either giants covered in silver armor, humans with deformed facial features and linen clothes, and large chunks of flesh overgrown with eyes. They sat quietly in their rows of seats, their eyes glazed over and indifferent as they stared in the direction of the long, mottled table. These were all marionettes that Klein had gathered in the forsaken land of the gods. Every time he needed to switch location, and it wasn't convenient for him to carry too many with him, he would sacrifice a batch of them above the gray fog. Of course, this had nothing to do with environmental protection. Instead, it was what had happened to the foggy town, and the scene displayed by Zaratul. It made Klein instinctively believe that there was a high chance that a particular ritual would require many marionettes. Therefore, he had always been very frugal in this aspect. As for why he didn't hang these marionettes up and had made them sit in rows in a conjured theater as members of the audience, this was because Klein felt that the actions of the Antigonus family's ancestor and Zaratul were a little perverse. He had tried to imitate and mimic them, but the goal was for acting. Now he didn't need it anymore.
But how can such a marionette city produce corresponding spirit world information? The spirit world is a gathering of the past, present, and future information, but it doesn't directly include such fake objects. Generated from what others know? Every living being's actions and words would be reflected in the spirit world in an abstract manner, becoming the source of divination. When their actions, words, and certain intense feelings are clearly built into a marionette city, the city's spirit world projection would appear, turning into a true existence. The interactions involved in this are linked to the more profound secrets of the spirit world.
Klein closed the Fool card in thought and played with it. As he had already reached the angel level, he had a certain understanding regarding the creation of the cards of blasphemy. Back then, not only was Roselle able to draw powers from knowledge, but he could also give actual powers to abstract knowledge. As for what kind of material the Emperor used to create it, and how he accomplished the effects of anti-divination and anti-prophecy at the level of deities, Klein was unable to figure it out. After some thought, Klein tried to accommodate the Fool card in his body. His condition immediately changed. His body was covered with colorful clothes, and there was an extremely gorgeous piece of headwear on his head. His aura was deep and terrifying, but it gave off a comical, ridiculous, ludicrous feeling. It was a condition filled with a strange conflict. The space attached to Sapphira Castle gently swayed, as though it wanted to surrender to the feet of this indescribable deity.
My level has been enhanced a little. There aren't any substantial changes. After all, I'm already the owner of Sapphira Castle. It's like I have a fashionable costume that can accentuate my aura.
Klein shook his head and said a few self-deprecating words. At the same time, a transparent and distorted worm of spirit crawled out from his body, forming a figure that was identical to him. After splitting off a worm of spirit of himself that could respond to prayers at any moment, Klein returned to the real world and strolled around Beltane City. He used the method of granting wishes to treat the injuries of people, and he learned about the war from them. Denitz couldn't help but curse when he heard the crew's report.
Dodge *T. They actually finished the whale oil? Why didn't you stop them?
As they passed by the Gargus archipelago, Denitz and his crew bought a batch of whale oil that hadn't been refined. They planned on bringing it back to Bayam and selling it at a high price. Who would have expected that a portion of it had been secretly eaten by the City of Silver's half-giants? The crew member glanced at the oracle and whispered, "They don't understand what we're talking about. We don't understand what they're talking about either. Only the shortest one can communicate, but it doesn't mean we can find him at any time. He always cogitates in places where the sun shines, changing positions every time." Danitz subconsciously sneered.
This is what happens to illiterates. If you could grasp all sorts of languages like ancient Faesak, Jotun, and Elvish like me, something like that wouldn't have happened. Of course, linguistic talent is related to intelligence. You don't have to force yourself.
The crewman carefully looked at Danitz again and said, Oracle, they ate the portion of whale oil you bought.
Dogsh asterisk T.
Danitz's reaction was faster than his thoughts as he rushed towards the cabin. After a period of chaos, Danitz received compensation with a Sequence 8 Beyonder characteristic. He didn't know if he had profited or suffered a loss. After all, the dirty bodily fluids left on the characteristic made him feel disgusted and nauseous. By the time the ship returned to peace, City of Generosity Bayam was already in front of the City of Silver's reconnaissance team. Derek led Leoval, Candace, and the others to the deck and looked at the destination of their journey. Although they had passed by many ports, they had never been allowed to alight from the ship. They could only watch from afar. Now it was finally time for them to step onto the land outside. Even so, the large number of people, houses, and hardships that they had seen from afar were still unable to conceal their bubbling enthusiasm. They continued to yearn for life in the world of light. Of course, having been used to the darkness and lightning, they took quite some time before they could get used to the sun outside. If not for the fact that they were Beyonders, they would have suffered permanent damage to their eyes. As he looked at the docks and the numerous people, the airships that were traveling high in the sky, and the other ships around him while hearing noises that he could barely understand, Derek suddenly felt a sense of nervousness. This would be the area where the City of Silver would take up residence in the future. As he swept his gaze, he suddenly saw a man standing on the coastal lighthouse. He was wearing a long robe embroidered with the symbol of storm. His hair was dark blue, nearly black, like a clump of seaweed. His face was rough and carved. As their gazes met, Derek instantly calmed down and no longer felt uneasy. Chapter 1292, Entering Bayam for the First Time. After the huge ship belonging to the Resistance docked, all of the City of Silver citizens changed into round-neck shirts, brown jackets, pantaloons, and dark-colored caps before following Oracle Danitz down the ship. They prepared to pass through the dock to enter the City of Generosity Bayam. Those clothes had been prepared beforehand. It's really uncomfortable wearing this. It's not suitable for battle. As he walked, Leoval moved his limbs and whispered to Elder Derek. Derek nodded slightly and said,
But it's better to hide ourselves and not be too eye-catching. We don't want to become the focus of attention.
Derek's analysis wasn't a problem at all. After all, they were outsiders, and they only numbered 21 people. It was best if they didn't attract the attention of others, but he seemed to have forgotten a crucial detail. But they're all looking at us. Candace quickly surveyed the area and whispered. The workers who were dressed crudely or half-naked at the pier all looked over at the tourists who wore all kinds of get-ups. They're tall. A Bayam resident with bronze skin and slightly curly hair could not help but sigh. His height was only around 160. This was the height of all the male commoners in the current colonial era. As for the people of the City of Silver, other than Derek, who was only slightly over 2 meters tall, the rest were on average above 2.3 meters. The tallest of them exceeded 2.5 meters. To have such half-giants walk through the docks amidst the crowd was equally eye-catching no matter what they wore. Phaeacians? Has the slave trade begun again? A Loanese in a top hat and formal suit turned his head to gossip with his companion. He believed that the City of Silver entourage were Phaeacian slaves that the Rorstad government had bought from the Loan Kingdom. After all, in this world, the only ones he could think of who had such heights and such numbers were the barbarians who claimed to be descendants of giants. His partner shook his head and frowned. It doesn't seem like the case. Most Phaeacians have light blue eyes. Furthermore, even if they are Phaeacian, few of them exceed 2 meters in height, unless these are nobles or high-ranking prisoners of war. Although Phaeac didn't have a clear rule, in all kinds of industries, especially in the military, there was a phenomenon that one's height determined one's status. Of course, this wasn't the only condition. It was also a combination of family background, nobility, and ranks. Due to such traditions, the descendants of Phaeacian royalty and the military brass were generally taller than 2 meters. This was actually a superficial phenomenon that, at its essence, was an influence of their beyonder characteristics. Those who became one of the brass of the Phaeacian military were either nobles or at least sequence 5. And for the latter, due to the repeated influence of the giant pathways potions, their height would definitely reach the standard height. Those who chose the Red Priest pathway would also have a certain increase in height. However, the signs weren't as obvious in their early stages as those from the giant pathway, and the total increase in height was only a few centimeters. They had to become a demigod to experience a qualitative change. For noble descendants, their ancestors were more or less giants, or had marital alliances with giants. Regardless of whether they inherited the beyonder characteristics, the corresponding genes accumulated over generations would definitely allow their normal height to exceed 2 meters. Among them, families who were still in control of a portion of the giant pathway's potion formulas and those who had a certain heritage tend to be in the same situation as the residents of the City of Silver. The royal family in charge of the Red Priest pathway maintained the heights of their descendants through marital alliances. The residents of the City of Silver, who were being scrutinized by numerous gazes, felt increasingly uneasy. It was as if they had returned to the cursed land where they were being watched by monsters as they walked in the dark. Derek was very calm and composed. He looked around and said to the members of the reconnaissance team,
They don't have any ill intentions.
After confirming that Mr. Hangman was in this city and how he knew that he had arrived, Derek no longer felt isolated and helpless. It wasn't that he didn't trust the messenger that Mr. Fool had appointed, but that he believed that he didn't want to trouble a god as much as possible in his daily life. The best thing to do was resolve problems himself. And when it came to dealing with his own problems, Derek was ultimately unfamiliar with the outside world, so he wasn't too confident. At this moment, to have an experienced, trustable, extremely intelligent native with a meticulous mind help him would definitely be the best option. Of course, Derek also knew that Mr. Hanged Man wouldn't make any contact with him on the surface because he belonged to another faction. He wasn't a believer of Sea God, so if he acted too warmly over matters regarding the City of Silver, he was bound to be suspected. Derek thought in anticipation,
However, there will always be a proper reason and suitable opportunities to meet.
Amidst his thoughts, he and the members of the City of Silver's reconnaissance team followed Danitz out of the dock and arrived on the streets. Their visions suddenly broadened as they saw more people than before and heard all sorts of voices. To the people of the City of Silver, this was even more lively than the grandest harvest in their hometown. At a glance, there were countless people dressed in strange clothes with all kinds of unique characteristics. Some were in a hurry, others were strolling leisurely, and some were carrying large pieces of fruit. They used pipes to suck in the liquid, or held food that looked like the delicious pies on the ship, occasionally taking a bite. Apart from these, horse-like creatures that pulled carriages producing tinkling sounds, the metallic objects that moved extremely fast, and the smell of the various spices that filled the streets made people of the City of Silver feel like they had come to another world. And to them, this was indeed another world. Even though they were a little fearful and uneasy, and were not too used to such a scene, everyone could clearly feel the vibrancy of this scene. This was like the sunlight in one's soul, reflecting the sun in the sky. This is the place where we will live, battle, and reproduce in the future. Derek, Leaval, Candace, and the others subconsciously had similar thoughts. They felt a little uneasy, but didn't reject any of it. Danitz looked at their faces, which had been stunned silly by Bayam's bustling scene in satisfaction as he inwardly muttered,
This is only Bayam. If you were to go to Trier and Backland, are you going to kneel down and kiss the ground?
This world-famous pirate controlled his urge to mock them, as he was now Mr. Fool's messenger. He couldn't ruin the image of a deity. After leading the City of Silver people to a rather luxurious hotel, Danitz gestured for the crew to handle the check-in, as he spoke in fluent Jotun to his guests.
It's getting dark. We'll stay here for one night and leave the city tomorrow. The place where you will build your city has been arranged. It's on the other side of the forest. There's a natural harbor and a few roads that lead to Bayam. Roads to this city. After that, we'll expand the main road and build a railway that leads to your city.
Railway. Derek, who had studied during the tarot gathering, knew what it meant. He nodded gratefully and inwardly praised Mr. Fool once again. Danitz continued.
We've already helped you level the area and left the space needed for some basic facilities such as water pipes and gas pipes. When you begin building houses, we'll send a team over to help with the matters. Also, the corresponding construction materials and temporary tents have been prepared for you. Thank Mr. Fool. There's also the help of the Church of the Lord of Storms in this matter, otherwise we wouldn't have been able to purchase so much material. However, they mainly did so to earn additional funds.
The Rorstead new government hadn't been established for long, and its connections with the outside world weren't comprehensive enough. What they didn't expect was that the Church of the Lord of Storms had taken the initiative to provide help on the City of Silver's matter. Water pipes. Gas pipes. Derek gradually couldn't understand what was being said, but he still put on a pensive expression. There were a few times when Danitz nearly said the word Dogstadt in passing. Without speaking another word, he introduced the hotel.
This is a hotel that Phasacians like to live in at Bayam the most. The ceiling might be a little too low for you, but it won't be low enough to hit your heads.
With that said, Danitz smiled.
At the end of this street is Red Theater.
He revealed a smile that all men understood. However, the people of the City of Silver didn't understand.
Seriously, the Emperor said that the most ancient human occupation is the selling of their bodies. They actually don't know what I'm talking about.
The corners of Danitz's mouth twitched as he gave up on the topic. After his second and third mates were done with the check-in, he led the entourage up to the second floor and assigned them their rooms. After doing this, he took out a stack of cards that he had long written, and he distributed them to the members of the City of Silver who were scouting the area.
Every card has a few words in the local language and the corresponding word in Jotun. If you need any services or food, you can ring the bell here. When the attendant comes over, show him the card. Of course, they might not be able to understand it, but they will definitely seek help from people who understand it.
This was a simple and easy method to understand. The people of the City of Silver easily grasped how to use the cards, secretly excited that they could finally communicate with the people here. Following that, Danitz demonstrated how to switch on the water and how to use the toilet and how to light up the gas wall lamps. It made Derek, Leoval, and Candace feel like they had arrived at a divine kingdom. All it took to have water flow was to press a switch. A button was enough to wash away their excrement without leaving any stains. There was a lantern that kept emitting light once it was ignited. These were all things that they didn't dare to imagine in the past. And these things would become part of their new lives. By the time the City of Silver's members had gotten used to the hotel, the sky had completely darkened. Night had begun to rule the city. Although Derek and company had long confirmed that there was no danger of monsters attacking in the dark in the outside world, they were still instinctively afraid. Therefore, they would either emit light themselves or light up the gas wall lamps. At that moment, they saw gas lamps lighting up one after another on the streets, the houses, both near and far, outside the glass windows. These lights dispersed the darkness in their respective areas. In the eyes of the people of the City of Silver, the bright and dim lights were like the galaxy landing on the ground at night. Chapter 1293, Devil's Oil Painting, in a warehouse that was being rebuilt in Pritz Harbor. Fors met her teacher, Dorian Gray Abraham, once again a few days later. Dorian asked in a low voice, "Are you ready?" Back when they met, he had already informed Fors of the ritual requirement of the Apprentice Pathway's Sequence 4 Secret Sorcerer so that she could make advanced preparations.
More or less. I should be able to satisfy the requirements.
Fors replied without much confidence. The advancement ritual of a secret sorcerer was relatively simple, but in this case, simple was the antonym for complex and not difficult. To Fors, she wished that it was something else. The ritual required the candidate to seal a demigod-level creature with clear animosity. The less external help one received, the better the ritual's effects. As for the target's level, as long as it wasn't lower than a demigod, it was fine. It had virtually no effect on the ritual. Upon hearing that, Dorian nodded and said,
That should be fine. That ritual is really difficult for a Sequence 5 Beyonder to complete it on their own. It's necessary to seek help at appropriate times, but you mustn't go overboard, such as exceeding the corresponding limitations. Otherwise, the ritual will definitely fail.
The suggestion he had previously provided to Fors was to borrow a Grade 1 sealed artifact. It would be best if she didn't even hire a saint-level helper, Fors said vaguely.
I only plan on making a wish to Mr. Fool to increase the success rate of advancement after consuming the potion. This is closer to obtaining good luck when consuming the potion, rather than being blessed and protected while sealing the demigod creature. Other than that, I'll be using the painting that you mentioned.
The painting wasn't a Grade 0 sealed artifact, the Scroll of God, but the Abraham family's Grade 1 sealed artifact. It was called Devil's Oil Painting. In the Fourth Epoch, when many members of the Abraham family had advanced to Sequence 4 Secret Sorcerer, they had created the oil painting to seal the corresponding demigod-level creatures. However, after being attacked by the Aurora Order and losing a lot of documents, Dorian Gray wasn't sure how many terrifying creatures were sealed in the Devil's Oil Painting. He was only certain that there was definitely more than one sealed inside. His original plan was to release a demigod-level creature that was completely insane from the Devil's Oil Painting, one that acted purely out of instinct. This could then be his student's ritual target. This made it much easier than dealing with a rational and intelligent saint. Furthermore, it was completely in line with the ritual's requirements, but he never expected Fors to directly borrow the Devil's Oil Painting. Dorian frowned and reminded her.
The Devil's Oil Painting only has the effect of imprisonment and sealing. It doesn't have the ability to actively affect the target. In other words, you have to stuff a demigod-level creature into the Devil's Oil Painting.
Fors nodded, indicating that she knew this.
Teacher, you mentioned that one's record ability isn't considered external help.
Yes.
Dorian Gray gave a definite answer. If her record powers were considered external help, almost no traveler could advance. After all, record was the core ability of the apprentice pathway before they became demigods. Once it was excluded, Fors would be left only with the means to flee, making it difficult for her to do anything to her enemies. Dorian said worriedly.
In theory, that's the case. However, you can only record at most 5 demigod-level powers.
Before he finished his sentence, he thought of Mr. Fool and his blessed, and felt a little more at ease. Fors tried convincing both her teacher and herself.
If the powers are matched well, it isn't impossible for me to succeed. It's just a mad creature that's acting on instinct.
Dorian nodded indiscernibly and didn't say anything else. He immediately summoned his contracted creature, Malmuth, who loved music, and took out the Secret Sorcerer main and supplementary ingredients. He then concocted a bottle of Secret Sorcerer potion for his student. Dorian continued to warn her worriedly before handing the potion to Fors.
If there's no way to complete the seal, there's no need to forcefully consume it. Even if the potion and glass bottle fuses together and turns into a sealed artifact, we can also pray to Mr. Fool to restore it to a Beyonder characteristic.
Inside the glass bottle were layers of stellar radiance, as though the Milky Way in the sky had been sucked into the potion.
All right.
Fors nodded heavily, indicating that she wasn't worried that the potion would be wasted. She had made plans ahead of time. She would immediately teleport away once she realized she couldn't seal the released demigod-level creature before making a wish to Mr. Fool and getting him to resolve it. Dorian then took out an oil painting from his suitcase, which was filled with abstract images. It was an image that no one could understand. Just looking at it would make one feel dizzy and mentally weak. This was the Devil's Oil Painting that had sealed countless terrifying creatures. Dorian held the Devil's Oil Painting and said solemnly to Fors,
If you can successfully advance, I only have one request. That is, on the night of the full moon, listen to what Mr. Dorr is saying and ask him the reasons for his actions.
The members of the Abraham family still couldn't fully accept that the curse they had suffered from had stemmed from their ancestor. They felt that Mr. Dorr might not know the consequences of his plea for help. They wished to figure out the full truth.
All right.
Faced with her teacher's sincere request, Fors agreed without any hesitation. Following that, she took the Devil's Oil painting, teleported out of Pritz Harbor, and came to a vast desert where no humans lived. This way, even if an accident happened during the ritual, she had plenty of time to resolve it and not affect ordinary people. After checking the surroundings and preparing herself, Fors inserted the Devil's Oil painting into the ground. She then clasped her hands together and bowed her head to pray to Mr. Fool. She wished that he could increase her chances of advancing after consuming the potion. Without any pause, she saw the illusory grayish-white fog and knew that Mr. Fool had already responded. After stalling for a few seconds, Fors finally convinced herself. She took out the herbal powder she had prepared, and she scattered it on the Devil's Oil painting. Then, she recited the incantation to release the seal in Jotun. This was an incantation that only released one creature. Without a sound, the powder that was floating in the air landed on the oil painting and rapidly spun around a central point. As it spun, the surface of the oil painting turned illusory as if a deep vortex was forming. Suddenly, a bluish-black hand emerged from the vortex, one that showed signs of decay. It stretched out from the oil painting to the outside world. Fors's body suddenly turned cold as though she had fallen into a frozen lake. While clearing up her mind, it also made her seem to lose control of her body. No matter how hard she tried, she was unable to move her limbs. At that moment, Fors seemed to return to her past state of writing books at night and sleeping during the day. At that time, she often felt that she had woken up, but she couldn't move at all. It was as though she was being pressed down by an invisible creature. Although the terrifying creature in the Devil's Oil painting had yet to fully escape, its influence on the outside world, with its godhood, made Fors lose most of her ability to resist. Once it fully escapes from the oil painting, Fors would even lose control merely from looking at it directly. The difference between the two in their lives, natural order, was unimaginable in certain aspects. Gradually, Fors's consciousness blurred a little, having a nagging feeling that she was already lucid. She raised her arm and moved her feet, but on second thought, she realized that it was only her imagination. As her body turned colder, the feeling of being pressed down by an invisible creature became more obvious. Fortunately, she had a bunch of demigods providing her information, allowing her to close her eyes in time. She didn't look at the Devil's Oil painting, otherwise the consequences would be dire. Using cogitation to maintain a certain level of clarity, Fors began counting down. According to Mr. World's warning, she knew that the terrifying creature would need 5 seconds to completely escape the Devil's Oil painting. 4, 3, 2. With just 1 second left, an illusory book appeared in Fors's eyes. It quickly flipped and stopped on one page. 1! Just as Fors finished counting, she suddenly spread open her arms. Around her, peach blossoms fell in a colorful resplendence. The bluish-black hand that was about to grab her neck moved away from her and was blocked by the peach forest that was blooming with vegetation and flowers. It was separated by a mountain that was the forest's river source, making it only possible for it to enter through a small cave. This was a fairy tale magic Fors had recorded from Ma'am Hermit. It was called Peach Blossom Source. It could create an isolation barrier from the outside world, making it very difficult for the outside world to connect to it. Seizing this opportunity, Fors, who barely managed to regain control of her body, took out a queen chess piece from Roselle's chess from a pocket and threw it at the source of the peach blossom scene, throwing it at the cave that penetrated through the flowing river. This was another fairy tale magic she had recorded, called the chessboard of time. Its effect was to slow the target's movements, as though it had entered a region in which time flowed slower. With a smack, the actions of the bluish-black palm that was trying hard to break through the peach blossom source changed from extending outwards to squirming. Fors didn't even look at the effects. She used an invisible hand to pick up the Devil's Oil painting that was stuck in the sand, and she held it right up to the cave. After 1 or 2 seconds, the bluish-black palm returned to normal. Its movements became extremely fast as it charged out of the peach blossom source and crashed into the oil painting. As the oil painting shook, the terrifying creature penetrated the surface and landed in it. Forrest was delighted. Without any hesitation, she recited the incantation and closed the outer seal of the devil's oil painting.
Thankfully, that demigod creature has already lost control. It's left with nothing but madness and lacks intelligence. I wonder if I will directly hear Mr. Door's shouts after consuming the potion.
Still nervous, Forrest took out the Secret's Sorcerer potion bottle and poured it into her mouth. Chapter 1294, Conversation.
If that demigod creature didn't slam into the devil's oil painting on its own accord, I'd have to summon Mr. World's historical void projection. I wonder if that can be considered as directly hiring a helper at the angel level.
As Forrest pondered, she drank the potion. To her, the potion was like icy water that could hurt someone due to the extreme temperature. All her senses vanished in the areas that it passed, leaving only her still thoughts. It was inevitable that a person would hallucinate in extreme cold temperatures. In Forrest's vision, a night sky instantly appeared. It was dotted with countless stars that weaved together to form a dreamlike river. Forrest's body began reflecting bits of stellar radiance as if they came from her own body. The tiny bits of pure stellar radiance formed an invisible connection with the different stars in the night sky. As the light shimmered, they twisted and squirmed as insect-like creatures crawled out of Forrest's body. They wanted to seek refuge in the Milky Way, formed by an array of embedded diamond shards. Each of them carried a portion of their own flesh and consciousness, as though they were uncontrollable avatars. Forrest's thoughts quickly turned chaotic, and she fell into confusion. She almost couldn't control the urge to separate herself. At that moment, she sensed an illusory object. It was the seal that she had completed using the devil's oil painting. It was projected into the mysterious world created by the potion, forming an abstract, blurry mark. Forrest didn't think further as she instinctively extended a portion of her consciousness, along with her spirituality, and intertwined with the abstract symbol. The mark wasn't exactly harmonious with her, as if it wasn't part of her, but it managed to barely merge with her. Suddenly, in Forrest's mind, the abstract symbol became rather clear. It consisted of a door that was layered with mysterious symbols. This door hid Forrest behind it, allowing her to isolate herself from the surrounding cosmos. At the same time, on the other side of the door, the sealed creature seemed to sense the aura of an enemy. Using its own godhood, it wildly corroded the illusory door. It happened to be able to reduce the influence the cosmos had on Forrest. After maintaining it for more than 10 seconds, the resplendent Milky Way's night sky slowly faded away. The stellar radiance then returned to Forrest's body, fused with her. At this moment, a deep darkness appeared in front of Forrest. Deep in the darkness was a perpetual storm and occasionally flashing lightning. The next second, Forrest heard a familiar voice. It stabbed into her head like steel nails stirring her brain matter. Forrest grimaced immediately. If she hadn't experienced such things over and over in the past, and had some level of resistance, as well as the fact that she was at the saint level, she would have likely lost control. Of course, there had to be some influence of good luck here. After a few seconds, she finally managed to calm herself down and hear what the voice was shouting by using cogitation. It was calling for help. It wasn't Jotun, Elvish, or ancient Hermes. Instead, it was a language that Forrest had never come into contact with before. However, she could understand it the moment she heard it. She felt like it was the true source of many languages.
Mr. Door would crazily shout for help every full moon. How disgraceful of a king of angels! However, even if he is seeking help, it's still a terrifying thing that I can't withstand.
Forrest lampooned silently. She was considering if she should pretend not to hear it, and wait until she had converged her spirituality and grasped the beyonder powers of a secrets sorcerer before conversing with Mr. Door during the next full moon, or to do it now. Suddenly, the shouts from afar stopped, and the surroundings became deathly silent. After 2 to 3 seconds, a wispy voice that could pierce through spirit bodies entered Forz's mind.
You used the beyonder characteristics of the Abraham family.
This sentence was said in a flat manner without any rise or fall, but it made the blood vessels on Forz's forehead throb. Her eyes turned bloodshot as her body turned resplendent. She almost lost control of herself.
Who are you?
Forz composed herself and asked deliberately. The voice that seemed to lure her into losing control said in a low, smiling voice,
You can call me Mr. Door. You should be familiar with me.
The King of Angels from the Fourth Epoch directly pointed out that Forz had a certain connection with him. She could hear the full moon ravings.
I'm going to write you into a novel.
Forz secretly gritted her teeth and asked,
Honorable Mr. Door, are you the ancestor of the Abraham family, Your Excellency Bethel?
The voice that had crossed countless barriers returned to its flatness.
Yes.
Then do you know that your cry for help has caused the entire Abraham family to be trapped in a curse that has lasted for more than 1,000 years? It's basically impossible for anyone to become a traveler or even a scribe. They often lose control during advancements or the night of the full moon.
Forz felt that she couldn't speak to Mr. Door for a long time. Otherwise, her inclination towards losing control would be irreversible. She directly posed the question that the Abrahams were most concerned about. Mr. Door fell silent for 2 seconds before saying,
They no longer have secret sorcerer or demigods?
There aren't any after the War of the Four Emperors, and the curse you brought has made it impossible for them to advance to a demigod. If you can stop crying for help for 10 years, a new Abraham demigod might be born. This will greatly aid in your escape.
Forz sincerely suggested. Mr. Door sighed and said,
I have been exiled to an eternal darkness and suffer the blockage of a perpetual storm. I have no way to know what's happening in the real world, nor did I expect that there isn't a single demigod left in the entire Abraham family.
Lies.
The one who calmly made this conclusion wasn't Forz, but rather Klein, who had accommodated the Fool's card as he held the Staff of the Stars while sitting in Sapphira Castle. He had been closely monitoring the corresponding Crimson Star. He remembered that the Emperor had mentioned in his diary that Mr. Door had a certain understanding of reality. He seemed to be able to use the changes brought about by the full moon to see the situation outside the seal. After sighing, Mr. Door continued,
Besides, I can't control the cries for help during the full moon.
Why?
Forz asked in surprise. Mr. Door said in an ethereal voice,
You're already a demigod, so you should know very well that the higher the sequence, the greater the threat of going mad. An ordinary angel, even those who can walk the land freely and do what they like, without needing to engage in any additional battles, could also be gradually influenced by the beyonder characteristics and become less like themselves. They might even enter a half-crazy state. I'm a king of angels who has been exiled and sealed for more than 1,000 years, and I don't even have someone to communicate with. My not going crazy means that I'm sufficiently powerful and lucky. On each full moon, the madness in me will be strengthened. I can't control it and can only constantly call for help.
So that's how it is. If I were locked up like this, I might have gone crazy in a few months. If I'm provided alcohol, newspapers, magazines, all kinds of books, and various delicacies, I can last a year. No, half a year.
Forz nodded in enlightenment and asked in a perfunctory manner,
Is there anything I can do for you? How can the Abrahams dispel the curse?
Mr. Door fell silent for a few seconds before saying,
Set up a ritual and help me escape. That way, the curse will cease to exist. There are 2 rituals that can be used. One is to sacrifice 3 demigods that are respectively from the seer, apprentice, and marauder pathway. The other is to extract the blood of at least 99 beyonders from the Abraham family. Use it to draw such a symbol.
I'll tell them.
Forrest immediately replied. At the same time, she added inwardly,
That's if Mr. Fool permits it.
Mr. Door laughed and said,
If I can escape because of this, I will help you become an angel.
His voice became more ethereal and weaker, as though he was slowly returning to his original state, as Forrest's advancement came to an end. About 2 to 3 seconds later, Forrest couldn't hear the sounds that slowly pushed her onto the path of losing control. The deep darkness and horrifying storms in front of her also vanished. However, before the scene completely faded away, Forrest could vaguely see that, on a vast land formed from dark red rocks, there was an ancient building that resembled a pyramid erected there. Behind the building was a deep darkness and twinkling stars. It was completely different from the cosmos that she had seen as an astrologer on the ground.
What's this?
Forrest shook her head and controlled her scattered thoughts as she began to carefully rein her spirituality back. After getting accustomed to the state of a secret sorcerer, she immediately took on a praying posture and reported her previous experiences to Mr. Fool without missing anything. After doing this, Forrest put away the Devil's Oil painting, teleported back to Pritz Harbor, and met her teacher, Dorian Gray Abraham, who was waiting in the warehouse. Seeing that his student was safe and sound, Dorian heaved a sigh of relief and said in a pious manner,
Thanks to Mr. Fool for his blessings.
He had finally taught a Sequence 4 secret sorcerer who didn't show signs of betrayal. Due to Mr. Fool's lack of response, Forrest didn't inform her teacher of her conversation with Mr. Door. She planned on waiting until the next full moon. She also relaxed and smiled.
Apart from thanking Mr. Fool, I have to thank you, teacher.
In the ancient palace above the fog, Klein didn't have any doubts about Mr. Door calling himself half crazy. He only felt that there had to be more secrets hidden in the matter. For example, why did Mr. Door keep enticing Emperor Roselle to visit the moon? It was a place that was occupied by an outer deity. After some thought, he took out the scarlet lunar corona and master key from the fog of history. He planned on creating a full moon environment and listening to Mr. Door's shouting. The effects of the combination had long been confirmed. Klein quickly heard the voice that seemed to pierce through his spirit body. The content of the shouting was,
Don't save me. Don't save me.
Chapter 1295. The Aftermath from the War's Front Lines. Don't save me. Don't save me. Being located in Sefer Castle and having accommodated the Fool's card, Klein already had the status of a King of Angels. He no longer suffered any direct corruption from Mr. Door's cries, but the contents of the cries made his scalp tingle. His pupils dilated, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of horror surging in his heart. He originally believed that Mr. Door was constantly shouting for help, but what he heard now was, Don't save me! Amidst Klein's silence, the weak, wispy voice pierced through his spirit body like needles. After shouting for more than 10 seconds, it suddenly changed. Ah! Help me! Help me! This time, there was a certain change in the language used. Klein expressionlessly leaned back into his chair and listened for nearly 10 seconds. Following that, he removed his control over the master key and the scarlet lunar corona's historical void projection, allowing the atmosphere of the space above the gray fog to completely return to silence. Phew! He exhaled as he tapped the edge of the long-modeled table out of habit and muttered to himself,
Mr. Door is indeed half mad, but the mad part isn't the him who is desperately screaming, but the him who appears calm, the one that's able to communicate with people rationally. The latter can influence the former, to a certain extent, distorting the contents of his shouts. When Mr. Door is lucid, he actually shouts, Don't save me. To a king of angels who had been imprisoned for more than 1,000 years, this definitely isn't a normal reaction. Unless he feels that he will bring a disaster that he doesn't wish to see upon returning to reality, a king of angels that has completely lost control, together with Mr. Door's communication with the emperor, and how he had been constantly enticing him to visit the moon which is occupied by an outer deity. There is another possibility to this matter. Mr. Door, who was exiled, lost the protection left behind by the original creator. He encountered the corruption of a particular outer deity and lost most of his rationality. His condition is only slightly better than the chained god. The apprentice pathway can wander the cosmos at sequence 3. Mr. Door's honorific name also includes the title of Guide of the Endless Cosmos. Does this mean that before this king of angels was exiled, he might have already made contact with outer deities and came under some influence? Yes, what does Miss Magician's final glimpse of the Crimson Land, pyramid-like buildings, and cosmos in a different area represent? This doesn't seem like it's in the current solar system, but it's a little different from the mausoleum that a Black Emperor needs. It's the lair of some outer deity who affected Mr. Door. Or should I say that when Mr. Door became a planeswalker and left legends behind on other planets with living beings, this is one of his anchor points. It's highly likely the latter, because when Miss Magician saw this scene, she didn't encounter any corruption from the cosmos.
The more Klein thought about it, the heavier his heart became. This was because it was possible that this was a reflection of how the apocalypse would dawn. The apocalypse was definitely not something that wouldn't happen by not thinking about it or pretending not to know.
It's no wonder Yellow Light Venathan had prophesied that the day when the curse is removed is the beginning of the true disaster for the Abrahams. Mr. Door keeps calling for help, causing the Abraham family to be unable to produce another demigod. Perhaps it's a certain form of protection. Although this will make the Abraham family lose their status and most precious items, making them mediocre, it can at least save their bloodline. In the prophecy, the solution to resolving the curse is in the hands of an apprentice who has obtained the help of a secret existence.
Klein chuckled softly and had an idea about the response to give Miss Magician.
He planned on getting Forrest to give a half-truth when informing her teacher. Firstly, it was to emphasize that Mr. Door was already half-crazy and extremely dangerous. Even communicating with him implied tremendous risks. Secondly, it was to not mention the second ritual for the curse removal. All she would say was about the sacrificing of a seer, a marauder, and an apprentice demigod. With the first point, the Abrahams could understand why their ancestor was insistent on calling for help. This was because he had already lost his mind and could do all sorts of terrifying things. This could effectively eliminate the anxiety of the Abrahams, preventing them from helping Mr. Door escape and allowing them to quickly start believing in the fool. The second point was to dispel the small number of extreme Abrahams who wanted to try their luck. This was because they lacked the ability to complete such a ritual. At the same time, informing the Abrahams of the ritual increased the trust they had in Fours. Ignoring the small number of secret sorcerers available, those who can become bizarro sorcerers are definitely very difficult to capture. Furthermore, most of them are concentrated in the secret order. To deal with them is to provoke Zaratul. Even if the Abrahams have a demigod and can use a grade 0 sealed artifact for a short period of time, it's impossible for them to complete the ritual so easily. Yes, dealing with a parasite is the most dangerous. If they aren't careful, they might end up targeting Amon's avatar. When that happens, it will be equivalent to serving Amon desserts. Also, I'll use the world's Gehrman sparrow in the future to remind Miss Magician to keep her guard up against the Abraham family's extremists.
Klein thought for a moment before replying Forrest's prayer. After returning from the fog of history to the real world, Klein boarded a steam locomotive and arrived at the capital of Mid-Seashire. In the past, it was the second largest city in Loen, and also the front line of the recent war, Constant City.
The damage suffered here is very serious.
After getting off the train and leaving the platform, Klein stood up high and looked at the industrial city. Although it was his first time here, he had seen all sorts of pictures of Constant in newspapers and magazines. Those photos were all black and white, and they recorded the various aspects of this city. Among them, there were 3 points that left a deep impression on Klein. Firstly, it was filled with chimneys and tall blast furnaces. It was as though it was a man-made forest. It gave a striking visual impact, one that was more representative of industry than Backland. Secondly, the majority of the buildings used concrete and steel. They were more densely built than their counterparts in Backland. Thirdly, there were many places that were stained with coal ashes, including the bodies of humans, but the air quality was better than Backland because the sea breeze was strong. And now, the towering blast furnaces, chimneys, and tall buildings had become rather sparse. All that was left was a pile of ruins. However, in comparison, the damage dealt to the factory district was lesser than the residential areas. This was because there were many steel and military factories that were equally important to FASAC.
The death toll here is definitely more than 100,000.
Klein sighed inwardly. He carried his luggage and walked down the stairs to the steam locomotive station and entered Constant City. On the way to the hotel, he continued his acting as a miracle invoker and randomly chose a young, burly man in his 30s.
I'm a wandering magician. My best magic trick is to grant anyone's wishes. Do you want to try it?
The previously thin-skinned Klein was now able to strike up a conversation naturally. The burly man glanced at him and waved his hand impatiently. "Can you let my father, mother, 2 brothers, and a child be revived?" With that said, he didn't wait for the magician to respond as he walked towards the nearest public carriage station in a slightly irritable manner. He struck his left chest with his right fist. Klein stood where he was and maintained the smile on his lips as he quietly watched the man leave. He recalled a magazine he had read on a steam locomotive. It contained several pages of images reflecting the current state of each cemetery in Constant City. The tombstones were similar to the original chimneys and blast furnaces. The racks that held up urns of ashes resembled tall buildings that had collapsed. The entirety of Constant City seemed to be buried in a cemetery. Retracting his smile, Klein walked around the already dried-up fountain and walked to a nearby inn. Along the way, he heard many pedestrians discussing haunted places and the places with terrifying monsters. When I was passing by the Maris River, I heard a lot of people crying in the water. I didn't dare to look and ran back into the city like the wind. That's nothing. I saw something even scarier on 9 Hyacinth Street. There was a face plastered on the window there, a very pale face. A few passers-by disappeared behind my house, and the blood continued all the way to the nearest ruin, but the police couldn't find the bodies. How terrifying. May the goddess bless us. Holy Lord of Storms, let these ghosts and monsters stay away from us. By the way, City Hall has posted an announcement that we are to report it to the police the moment such things are discovered.
From the looks of it, the meat grinder-like war made it impossible to placate many corpses, allowing them to turn into ghosts. Phew. Most of the time, some of the dead might not even have their bodies left intact. Yes, there are definitely many Beyonders who lost control due to a mental breakdown or from losing their limbs. Also, most of those who didn't consume the potion according to the normal procedures also easily lose control. The Nighthawks and mandated punishers will definitely clear up these matters, but at least in Constant City, people might have encountered plenty of Beyonder matters for quite a long period of time. After all, some ghosts and monsters are good at evasion and hiding. They are innately very cunning.
Klein walked straight and gained a new understanding of Constant's situation. Here, encountering supernatural events was no longer a coincidence. Instead, it was a daily occurrence with a certain probability. At this moment, Klein saw a group of Nighthawks wearing red gloves and black trench coats walk across the crossroad ahead of him. However, he didn't recognize any of them.
Indeed, the Cathedral of Serenity has sent the Red Gloves team to help. What's happening nearby?
Klein nodded indiscernibly and, following his spiritual intuition, cast his gaze to a particular apartment building behind a pile of ruins. On the 4th floor, behind an oriel window, a greatly rotting face was plastered to the window, looking out through the glass. Pale yellow liquid with black hints slid down the window, one after another.